Recently, it was announced that NHL players would be returning to the Olympics in 2026 and that the National Hockey League would be hosting a Four Nations tournament featuring national teams of NHL players from the United States, Canada, Sweden, and Finland in lieu of the All-Star game. And I want to talk about what Hurricanes players could be on that roster in the upcoming competitions. Probably heard about it already. It took the hockey world by storm, but let's recap real quick what's going on with the Four Nations face-off in 2025 and the Olympics in 2026 in Milano, Italy. On February 2nd, the NHL and the NHLPA announced that there would be a 2025 Four Nations face-off, which would be the first international tournament played by the National Hockey League since the 2016 World Cup of Hockey. Much like the World Cup of Hockey, it will feature NHL rules and be played on NHL-sized ice. It was also announced that the NHL would return to the Winter Olympics in Milan in 2026 and that they will also compete in 2030, marking the first time that the National Hockey League participated in the Olympics since 2014. So let me start by saying this. This is a great idea. The Four Nations face-off. Ever since the NBA did the in-season tournament, a lot of people have been calling for it. I personally was highly against having an in-season tournament unless it was circumstances like this. The NHL made a great call doing something other than the All-Star game, in my opinion, because personally, I haven't enjoyed the All-Star game since I was a kid. I know that's the primary target demographic of it, but even me as a hockey fan, I couldn't really enjoy it. I didn't really enjoy the skills competition, and that used to be the thing I enjoyed watching the most over during the All-Star weekend. And I think they've made a really good decision. They're switching it up, and they're giving people a taste of something they've been asking for, which is an international best-on-best tournament involving NHL players on NHL-sized ice with NHL rules. If something like this permanently or at least semi-permanently replaced the All-Star game, I would not be upset about it. So the way that I've got this split up is players who will definitively make their respective national team, players who are highly probable to make their respective national team, players who are kind of maybe close to making the cut but just might not, and lastly, some unlikely picks. And I will elaborate as to why each player is in the category that they're in. First things first, the first player needs absolutely no introduction, and you already know who it is. Sebastian Aho, who will more than likely not only be playing for Finland, but I think he will probably be wearing a letter A, and he might not be the first-line center, but if he's second-line center to anybody, it's going to be Sasha Barkov, and however you order it, those guys are going to be an excellent 1-2 punch for Finland, because both of them give you an excellent two-way game, steady contributions of offense. Every team that they're going up against in either the Four Nations face-off or the Olympics, they're all going to have high-powered offenses, they're going to have a lot of weapons, and you need players who will mitigate those high-powered offenses and take it to the other end and score. Aho is definitely one of those guys. He'll be utilized in all situations. 5-on-5, power play, penalty kill, you name it, Sebastian Aho. And his capability as an all-situations center will really be tested, but I think that it will shine in international competition. And that brings me to the next Finn. If whoever's coaching Finland has been watching Carolina closely over the last few years, in that of Teuvo Teravainen. Some people say that they don't think he makes the cut. I think that he still does. He will definitely be important to have in special team situations. And not just anybody has the playmaking and the vision of someone like Teuvo Teravainen, and as fast-paced as those games are going to be, they're going to be all best-on-best situations. You need a guy who can distribute the puck very quickly and very decisively. That is Teuvo Teravainen's game. He's not a shooter, but he might want to learn to try and be one for that tournament. Every opportunity you get to generate a high-danger chance, you should do it. Teravainen is more likely to make those through puck distribution as opposed to shooting. And I think that he'll be with Aho in special team situations, and he could be slotted in the top six or the bottom six on any theoretical Team Finland lineup. Next up, this will be more applicable to the 2026 Olympics in Milano, but you would have to think for Czechia, Martin Necas will definitely be on that team. I wouldn't be surprised if they put him at center as opposed to wing. Depending on who coaches Team Czechia, I could definitely see them saying, Martin Necas, go back to being the Sparta Prague Martin Necas, get possession of the puck, make things happen, because when you're in a best-on-best tournament like that, every single second that you have the puck, you want to make the most of it, because the team at the other end is far more capable than what you normally face on a day-to-day basis in the National Hockey League. And we've seen all the magic that Marty Necas can make happen when he has possession of the puck, and his skating ability is up there. He's got to be one of the best skaters in the league, if not the best. And particularly in 2026, when they're playing on the international ice, all that extra time and space that he can create on the bigger ice surface will really come in handy for Team Czechia. I expect him to rack up the points, particularly with assists, and with some flashy highlight reel individual efforts to score goals. Speaking of goal scoring, someone who can do plenty of that, but for Team Russia as opposed to Team Czechia, one of the best power forwards in the game, Andrei Svechnikov. You have occasional exceptions like Kirill Kaprizov, but for the most part, Russia loves to produce big, powerful players with heavy shots. Andrei Svechnikov is a left-handed shot who typically plays on the right wing, and he uses his size and his power to cut to the middle of the ice and to generate scoring opportunities, and his abilities as a puck distributor are really good as well, and we all know how capable he is at laying the body. Although Russia will not be competing in the Four Nations tournament, as of February 12th, the IIHF extended the ban on Russia and Belarus participating in international play. It will be next year when they decide if Russia can participate at the Olympics in 2026. Now, to talk about someone who the Canes have the rights to, but is by far the Hurricanes' #1 prospect, who has been talked about on this channel many times, Alexander Nikishin. He participated in the Beijing Olympics, so he's got some experience there in that regard. I think that he is an absolute lock to play for Team Russia or the Olympic athletes from Russia or the Soviet Union, whatever the hell they end up being called. And we all know what he's capable of. Amazing two-way defenseman, uses his size very well. He's made the hip check relevant again. Heavy slap shot, heavy one-timer. And one of the good things about this, there's been a lot of speculation that people think that because of him playing for SKA St. Petersburg in what is now the biggest hockey arena in the world, that he wouldn't come to North America. But consider this, when it comes to be time for the Olympics, there's the big six: Canada, Finland, Sweden, Czech Republic, Russia, and of course, the United States. Out of all those teams, 4 of them will be comprised completely of NHL players, in that of the United States, Sweden, Finland, and Canada. If Russia is allowed to participate in the Olympics, they're going to be hungry to win it, especially after the ban, and especially since they've not been able to actually participate as Russia since the doping scandal. It would be in Russia's best interests for Alexander Nikishin to be able to play in the NHL and play against NHL caliber talent, because 4 of the 5 teams that they would likely have to play against the most in order to get to the medal round and to win gold are going to be comprised completely of NHL players, the only exception of the Big Six in that being their team and Czechia. This bodes well for Alexander Nikishin joining the Hurricanes. Despite some of the recent doubts, I've had a little bit of them myself, but if they really want him to truly be ready for best-on-best Olympic hockey, the NHL is the best place for him to be, especially considering how large of a role he's going to play on that team. And as always, I cannot wait to see Alexander Nikishin in action with the Hurricanes. I still think it's going to happen. Now, for the last player that I think is a lock, I hope he is anyway, but the last player that I believe is an absolute lock, the greatest shutdown defenseman in the National Hockey League, Jaccob Slavin. And hopefully by the time that the Four Nations tournament is over, Jaccob Slavin will be acknowledged as the best shutdown defenseman in the world. I flirted with the idea of putting Jaccob Slavin in the second category for highly possible, but not definitive. Not because he's not good enough, but I'm not entirely sure what Bill Guerin's approach is going to be, and if that approach involves Jaccob Slavin. I would like to think that it does, because I think a pair of Jaccob Slavin and Adam Fox would not only provide you a ton of offense from the blue line, it would be practically impenetrable. Now, here's where I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I am standing by this. If the Four Nations tournament, or the Olympics, but for the sake of painting the picture here, if the Four Nations face-off comes down to the United States and Canada in particular, Team Canada, who will have McDavid, Bedard, Makar, McKinnon, Crosby, you name it, they've got a lot of players who are very offensively talented. You won't stop them from scoring in every single situation, but you need to negate them scoring enough to win. Mark my words, if Jaccob Slavin is not on Team USA in 2025 or 2026, they will not win. As much as the game has become focused on scoring, quick transitions, and getting the defense involved in the rush. You still need one of those guys on the blue line who can be the steady presence to slow the game down, and someone who you send out there when you're up by a goal and got 30 seconds left, and a lot of the aforementioned players are on the ice and they just pulled their goalie. Every single power play unit on every single team is going to have a great degree of lethality, and if you want to mitigate that enough to win, Jacob Slavin is the best person that Team USA can have to be that steady presence on the blue line, that safety valve that will allow the other 4 guys on the ice with him to do whatever they need to do and play a zero hesitation game because they know they've got the best in the business behind him at the blue line, and he's just one of those guys that makes everyone around him better. Jacob Slavin has to be on that team for them to win. Now, moving on to the highly possible category, there's actually only 2 Hurricanes in this particular part of the list. In this category, we have Jesper Fast and Dmitry Orlov. Fast is one of those Swiss Army knife type of wingers. You can move him up and down the lineup, but I think on Team Sweden, he would be filling more of a depth role. He would probably be utilized on the penalty kill and maybe on the second power play unit, but I don't think that he would be playing a top 6 role. Very important player. He would fill a similar role with Team Sweden that he normally does with the Hurricanes. The biggest difference with on the Hurricanes, he's moved up and down the lineup a whole lot, whereas with Team Sweden, I think that he would stay primarily in the bottom 6. Dmitry Orlov, I think, would probably be a bottom 4 defenseman on that team. Europeans in general love to play their offside. Dmitry Orlov's a left shot. He said growing up in Russia that he played on his right side. He did it in Boston. He did it to some degree in Washington over the years, and I think that you could potentially see him playing on his right side with Team Russia, so I think that he'll be there as well, more than likely, unless somebody else bumps him out of the lineup. The aforementioned Alexander Nikishin could be exactly why, but I think at least he would be there as a healthy extra, but I do think that he would be utilized. Now, as I move on to the maybe category, you may be wondering why a certain other Russian player was not mentioned in the highly possible category, in that of Pyotr Kochetkov. Pyotr Kochetkov, I think, is more than capable, especially by then because he'll have another year of experience under his belt. He will be more than capable of playing for that team. The problem with it is how many goalies are ahead of him. Vasilevsky, Bobrovsky, Shesterkin, Sorokin. There are a ton of goalies ahead of Pyotr Kochetkov. It is not that he is not good enough. He's just too far down a very deep depth chart. Russia produces some amazing goalies nowadays. So many of the league's best goalies are from Russia. So I could definitely see Kochetkov maybe getting a nod as a third-string goalie in 2026 and maybe moving up that depth chart by 2030. But as of right now, I have him in the maybe category for 2025 and 2026. I do think his time will come, just not in the upcoming tournament. So the next player that I'm going to mention, I think has an outside shot to make his respective national team, but for the same aforementioned reasons as with Pyotr Kochetkov, I don't think it's a lack of talent. He's just really far on a really good depth chart, and that is Seth Jarvis. To even be maybe remotely considered to play for Team Canada, you're doing something right. And Seth Jarvis, if he were to make that team, would definitely be a fourth liner and maybe even a penalty killer. I don't think he would be utilized heavily. But Seth Jarvis is one of those guys that goes in there and quietly turns games around and you don't even realize it. Speed, skill, elements of a power forward, bottom 6 grinder, all combined together to create Seth Jarvis. As much as I would like to see him make Team Canada, I just think that there's too many people ahead of him. I could potentially see him making it in 2030 when we really see what his ceiling is and everything. But I don't think that he'll be on that team. Maybe he'll be a healthy extra. I just don't see any way where he displaces any of the forwards ahead of him on the depth chart right now. It would be cool to see, though. But I am hopeful that Seth Jarvis will be on Team Canada in 2030. Now, the next player that I categorize as unlikely is Brady Shea. Brady Shea is an excellent two-way defenseman, and he does a great job for the Hurricanes night in and night out. I think he's been one of the most consistent players for the Hurricanes this season, but this is another case of there's just too many guys ahead of him, one of them being Slavin, in my opinion. But you already know Adam Fox is going to be there, both Hughes brothers, Charlie McAvoy. There are a lot of players who are going to be ahead of Brady Shea on that depth chart. Otherwise, I could see him being a healthy extra or called into the fray in the event of an injury or two. I think anybody from that team that drops out initially, I think if you lose any of those defensemen to injury, Brady Shea is one of the first guys that you consider calling. And lastly, the one who I think might be most on the bubble to make it for Team Sweden would be Felix Unger-Sorm, just from a lack of experience standpoint. But I watched him play in the World Junior Hockey Championship. I've been taking notes on him, and I'm going to do a big video on him. Sweden likes to produce playmakers, guys who make those little subtle saucer passes, create time and space with not only their skating ability, but just by utilizing a high hockey IQ, finding open ice, and being able to anticipate not just where the puck is going next, but where it's going after that and even after that. He likes to work in tight around the net and use that to his advantage. He likes to bait defenders into overcommitting before making a pass. Felix Ungersorm, in my opinion, is an untouchable as far as Hurricanes prospects go. I don't see him making Team Sweden in 2025 or 2026. Like I said, that's strictly from an experience standpoint. This kid has all the hockey IQ in the world, and he has a very bright future with the Hurricanes. And I would say, along with Alexander Nikishin, he's untouchable as far as prospects go. And then lastly, I'm just going to list two unlikelies here. Brett Pesce for Team USA and Jesperi Kotkaniemi for Team Finland. KK could have made Team Finland if he kept playing like he was playing in the first couple of months of the season. I'm hoping that he's going to find that again soon. KK is an excellent defensive center, but he's had trouble maintaining the offensive side of his game. He's had a little bit of trouble in the face-off circle. If he ever finds that consistency with his game, I could definitely see Jesperi Kotkaniemi being a fourth-line center for Team Finland, but I feel like they have several better options ahead of him, and I think that at the absolute best, he would be a healthy scratch for Team Finland. But as it stands right now, I don't see him making the cut. So that's going to be it for this video. I'm going to be doing a mailbag here before too much longer. I know I haven't produced a whole lot of stuff lately. I got to go down to see the Hurricanes play against the Panthers and the Stars in Raleigh this past weekend. Got to hang out with AB and Griff from Caniac Sessions. We had a really good time. I brought a really good friend of mine with me. It was a whole lot of fun. So we're going to sit down and probably talk about that trip at some point or another. I'm planning on making it down to Raleigh again sometime around maybe the second round of the playoffs or so. But until then, I plan on producing some more videos. I've got a couple of really cool projects. And I also very frequently work with the guys from Caniac Sessions and Caniac Report. If you haven't checked out their podcasts, I highly recommend it. Caniac Sessions will be releasing a new session in the morning, and Caniac Report pretty much always releases 2 episodes a week. I want to say Tuesday and Friday, and those guys make really good content as well, so please go check them out. And if you like this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you would, please consider donating to my Buy Me a Coffee. The link will be in the description. Thank you very much. Y'all take care, and I will see you next time.